That single thought would lead to one of the most disturbing and tragic stories in ancient history. A Roman emperor at the height of his power would take a young boy, have him castrated and force him to live as a woman, to fill the space once held by an empress he had loved and lost, or perhaps destroyed. This isn't just a story about cruelty, it's about obsession, power, grief, and how, in the hands of a man like Nero, all of those emotions turned into something horrifying. If you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. To understand how it got to this point, we have to go back to the rise of Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus. Nero became emperor at the age of 16 in the year 54 CE, after the death of his adopted father, Emperor Claudius. But Nero's path to power was paved by his mother, Agrippina the Younger. Ambitious and manipulative, Agrippina made sure her son had every advantage. She married Claudius, her own uncle, and convinced him to name Nero his heir, passing over his biological son, Britannicus. At first, Nero was a promising young ruler. Guided by his mother, the philosopher Seneca, and the military commander Burrus, his early reign was stable. He reduced taxes, supported the arts, and even banned capital punishment for a time. Rome, for a moment, had hope. But it wouldn't last. By the time Nero turned 20, his mother's influence began to feel suffocating. Agrippina wanted to rule through him. Nero wanted to rule alone. Their relationship quickly turned toxic. Ancient sources claim that Nero grew to hate her control and plotted to have her killed multiple times. First by poisoning, then by rigging a boat to sink beneath her. When those attempts failed, he ordered soldiers to stab her in her villa. After her death, Nero reportedly examined her body and commented on how beautiful she had once been. With his mother gone, Nero began to drift further into excess. He saw himself not just as a ruler, but as a performer, a godlike figure who could do anything. He sang in public, acted on stage, and forced Rome's elite to attend. No one dared to object. Then came Poppaea Sabina. Poppaea was everything Nero wanted. She was known for her beauty and charm. She first entered Nero's life as the wife of his friend Otho, but Nero quickly took her for himself. He divorced his first wife, Octavia, Claudius's daughter, and later had her executed. Poppaea became empress, and Nero was obsessed with her. She flattered him, supported his artistic ambitions, and gave him a daughter. But even she couldn't escape his rage. In 65 CE, Poppaea died under mysterious circumstances. According to ancient writers like Tacitus and Suetonius, Nero killed her in a fit of anger. Some say he kicked her in the stomach while she was pregnant. Others say it was an accident. Nero mourned her deeply. He held public funerals and treated her as a goddess. But his grief was strange. It didn't lead to healing. It led to something far darker. Not long after Poppaea's death, Nero found someone who reminded him of her, a young slave boy named Sporus. Sporus was probably between 10 and 14 years old. No one knows much about his background. What we do know is chilling. Ancient sources claim Nero was struck by how much Sporus resembled Poppaea. The boy's delicate face, his quiet manner, something about him made Nero believe he could bring Poppaea back. If not in spirit, then in form. And so Nero made a decision only someone with absolute power could make. He ordered Sporus to be castrated. The boy was permanently altered before reaching manhood. His body could no longer grow into that of an adult male. Afterward, Nero dressed him in the robes of an empress. He called him Poppaea. He took him as a wife in a public ceremony. Guests were invited. Vows were exchanged. Nero placed a veil on Sporus's head and referred to him as lady or queen. They traveled together as husband and wife. And Nero introduced him to foreign leaders as the new empress of Rome. This wasn't love. It was possession. It was grief turned into obsession. shaped by cruelty, and carried out through unthinkable control. Sporus wasn't a person to Nero. He was a replacement, a doll dressed in memory, and no one around Nero dared to protest. Who would challenge an emperor who killed his mother, his wives, and anyone else who stood in his way? To understand the horror of this, we also need to understand Roman attitudes toward gender and power. While Roman society allowed for certain forms of male-male relationships, it was always shaped by hierarchy and dominance. A Roman male citizen was expected to be the one in control. Being penetrated, especially as an adult man, was considered shameful. Castrating a boy and marrying him was not just shocking, it crossed every boundary of Roman masculinity and tradition. And yet Nero didn't care. He was above rules. He was Rome. But Sporus was real. He felt real pain, real fear. Imagine being a child having no choice, no voice, and being forced to live as someone you're not. All to satisfy the delusions of the most dangerous man in the empire. Sporus was stripped of his identity, turned into a symbol, and paraded around like a shadow of a dead woman. He lived with Nero not just as a victim, but as a puppet. Then, in 68 CE, everything changed. Nero's popularity collapsed. His overspending, cruelty, and failure to manage the empire led to revolts. The Senate declared him a public enemy. Nero, panicked and abandoned, fled Rome and took his own life with the help of a servant. His final words, according to legend, were, "What an artist dies in me." After Nero's death, Sporus did not return to a normal life, because such a life was never possible for him. He was passed from one powerful man to another, first to Nymphidius Sabinus, a commander of the Praetorian Guard, who tried to use Sporus as a political tool, calling him the widow of Nero. Later to Otho, one of Nero's short-lived successors. Sporus became a living reminder of Nero's madness, dragged from palace to palace like a ghost that wouldn't fade. Finally, when Emperor Vitellius came to power, he planned to humiliate Sporus publicly by forcing him to take part in a grotesque parody of a wedding, this time as a bride marrying a gladiator. Sporus couldn't bear it. Before the ceremony could happen, he killed himself. He was likely no older than 20. History remembers Nero as a tyrant, an egomaniac, and a murderer. But the story of Sporus is more than just another example of Nero's cruelty. It's a tragic tale of how power, when unchecked, destroys everything it touches. Not just cities or enemies, but people, innocent people. Sporus's life was stolen from him, his name, his body, his future. He became a symbol of someone else's grief, someone else's madness. And yet, buried beneath the silence of history, his story still speaks. It asks us to remember not just the emperors and battles, but the voiceless, the ones history tried to forget. Power can raise men to the heavens, but it can also crush the human soul beneath its feet. Nero believed he could control everything, even death. In the end, he couldn't bring Poppaea back, but he did destroy Sporus trying, and that is a tragedy Rome never deserved to forget.